All right, so in the previous lesson, we talked about a couple of different ways of creating repos on GitHub. So in this lesson, we're going to just create two of them, okay? Both ways, actually. So first of all, let's say that we already have some kind of project and repo that is on our local machine, which we've been working on, okay? In previous tutorials, you might recognize this. So we've got a project one, and this is the repo right here, and this is what we want to push up to a new remote repository on GitHub. So just open up your GitHub account and make sure you are on the repositories tab. Now to upload it, I'm going to just click on this new button, but if you just signed up, you might not see this new button. You might see a welcome screen with a bigger button that says create your first repository, and you can go ahead and click on it. Okay, so now we need to give this repo a name, and I'm going to call it Project 1, just so that it matches up with what our local Project 1 is called. Now we can give this repo a description. I'm not going to write I'm not going to write anything in here, but this is important. So the repo can be either public or private. You may select one of these options. Public means, of course, that anyone could see this repository. And we also have this private option. But for now, we're just going to keep it public. Okay, so we can initialize this repo with a README file if we want to. We can add some information about the repository in the README file. For example, you may add some information about the library in your project, how to use it, or something like that. Don't need that for now. So we can also add a git ignore file. It comes with all these different options for an ignore file. For instance, if we have a node project, then we can use the node git ignore file. So we can also add a license if we want to. I'm not going to add it for now. I am going to create this repository just like so. All right, so this is going to set up that remote repository for us right here on GitHub. And it's going to direct you to this page and give you some setup instructions. And you can follow those instructions to set up your repo. So this is the URL of your online Git repository. So I'm going to copy that because I'm going to need that in a second. So you can copy it too just by clicking on this board. So now what we want to do is go to our local repository and push all of the code to our remote repository, okay? So first of all, I'm going to make sure that I've not changed anything, that in other words, there's nothing left to commit. And to do that, I'm just going to say git status, and yeah, everything's clean. So now we're good to go. We're good to push this code to the remote repo. So what we need to do is, let's just say git and then push. So that's the keyword for pushing code up. Then we say where we want to push it to. So I'm going to paste in this URL because that's the repo that we're pushing to. Go back and get it if you forgot to copy it. Okay, so then we want to say which branch we want to push up. So we're going to push up the master branch. Of course, you can push up other branches as well, but for now, we're just going to push it to the master. And then if you click enter, it might take a few seconds or something like that to gather all the code and then push it right up to GitHub. Okay, so then we get a feedback message in here, which is basically saying that, yay, everything's done successfully. So now we've got this new master branch on a remote repository. Good job. So that's it. That's how we create a GitHub repository with an existing project. So let's take a look at the remote repository. If we click on the repository name right here, and yeah, we should see all the code. Pretty awesome. All right, so that's it. Okay, so now let's say another developer could come along to this URL right here and see this repository, and they could see this code, And if you wanted to see, for example, the index CSS file, you could just click on it and yeah, you can see that CSS. Now, if you wanted to clone this repo to your computer, you can just click this clone or download button and clone it. And I'm going to show you how we can do that. But first, I want to show you the commit history. So when we push to GitHub, that is the commit history of repo. So we can see everything that we've done in the past, and we can then click on each one of these commits to see more information about it. We can also see the branches. If we click on them here, we can see that we have a master branch. And okay, so we have pushed all of our existing code from the remote repo. So now I want to show you something else. For example, let's say that we want to make some changes and then push those changes to this repo. So to do that, I'm going to add just a p tag and say hello world in here, okay? And now let's add this to the staged area. So I'm going to say git add and then dot to add everything. And we're still committing exactly the same way to our local repository, first of all. So we'll commit this with a message, and let's say git commit -m and add p tag. And now we should push this again. So let's say git push and then the repo name. And now we could copy and paste that in again. And then we want to push this to the master. So you might say that every time that we make a push, typing this thing right here could be a little bit painful, yeah? So instead, what we can do is set up an alias in this repository to say what this URL is going to be. So that means we only have to type out one little word instead of this entire URL. So let's see it. Okay, so the way that we do that is by saying git remote. This stands for remote repositories. Then say add, because we want to add a remote repository. Then what we're going to do is give this remote repository an alias. Now the default one in GitHub is origin, and many people use this. So I'm going to use it as well. You should know it. So this is going to be an alias of this repository. So then all we need to do is type in the repository name. So I'll just paste that in, click enter. All right, so that's going to add this alias to the local repo. So now instead of typing git push and then the whole URL or go back and remember to copy and paste and all that, I can just say git push origin, which is now associated with this URL because this is the alias for it, and then the branch, of course, the master branch. So now it's going to do exactly the same thing, but it's a whole lot easier to push this thing up. All right, so now we've pushed it up, and if we check this out in GitHub, refresh the page, we should see that, yeah, whole commits are in here. So let's click on commits, and there is add p tag right in here. Okay, so we've pushed it up to this remote repository. We've updated it. Now other developers can see all those updated files, just like they ought to be able to do. Perfectamundo. Okay, so we've said that we're going to learn two different ways of creating a repo. So the second method, let's assume that we don't already have a local repository. So let's now create a new repository. So first of all, I'm just going to go to my profile, and then I'll go to repositories, create a new one. So we're going to do the same thing again. I'm just going to give this repository a name. So I'll call this project 3. And again, I'm not going to add to this description. It's just going to be public this time as well. I'll add a README file. So I'm going to click the Create button, and it's going to do exactly the same thing. All right, so we have this README file and just one commit, the initial commit to add this README file. All right, great. So now we only have one branch. That's the master branch. I'm just keeping it simple for now. All right, so what we want to do is this. We want to clone this repository to our local computer. So to do that, click this button right here. And again, this is the URL right here to this remote repository. So you can click this button to copy it to your clipboard. All right. So now I'm going to close these files. And now I'll go back inside the terminal. I want to go up a directory because we're creating a new repository, right? So let's say cd for change directory ... to go up a level, and then I want to clone my repository. All right, so to clone the repo, we'll say git clone and then paste in the URL that we copied from the hub, and this is my remote repo that you saw me and hopefully you made as well. Cool. So now we've got project 3. We can navigate into that by saying cd project 3, and now we're inside this repository locally. All right. So we've cloned it to our computer and we can see this repo right here. Okay, great. So let's make some commits to this and upload it onto GitHub. So I'm going to right click over here and add a new file, index.html. Let's add an HTML template and add a title. And I'll just save that. And then down here, what we want to do is add this. And we'll add and commit this locally first. So I'm going to say git add to add it to the staging area. Then git commit with a message. And the message is going to be add index file. All right, so now we need to push this up to the remote repo. Now, remember last time we had to specify an alias for the remote repository. So we had to say git add remote, then origin, and then the link to the repository. Now we don't have to do that, though, this time, because we've cloned it from GitHub, and this repo already has set up the origin alias for us. So that happens when we clone it. Now what we can do is push up to the origin because it's already stored here. So that means I'll say git push origin, and we want to push it to the master branch. And then this is going to take this master branch and push it up to the remote repository. All right, perfect. So let's check out the repo over here, and if we refresh, now we can see that updated commit. All right, so that's how you set up remote repositories on GitHub. We'll take a short break right here, and we'll come back in the next lesson.